What's up guys, Pokémon TCG here, and welcome back to another video on the channel. Today guys, we're going to be doing something a little bit different, and today we're going to be talking about some of the most underrated or kind of just cool cards in the current standard format in the Pokemon trading card game right now. And these are just cards that I think are either underutilized, maybe it's just some funny tech cards that could make a small difference, or just a really cool mechanics in the game right now. Or cards that legitimately could be meta changers that just haven't been implemented yet. And this entire video, I just want to make it clear right now, this is not meta manipulation. This isn't me trying to say, oh, everyone should be playing this, or oh, everyone's whatever. I'm basically just showing off some of the cards that I like in this format that I think could be kind of fun to use. At the very worst, if you see a card that you don't really like or don't really think is a good idea, that's totally fine. These are just kind of random cards that I went through. I literally scrolled through every single card in Pokemon TCG Live and just kind of cherry picked a few that I thought looked interesting and that I thought were kind of underrated in this current format for one reason or another. So we're going to talk about each one of them, and yeah, we're just going to break down kind of the most underrated cards in Standard. You might see a couple that are relevant in the game right now, but if they're in here, it's because I think that they should be a lot more relevant in the meta, and we'll talk about that. Before we get started, I would quickly ask to see if you're subscribed. I put a ton of effort into planning and making these videos, which can get tough sometimes due to me being a college student. Subscribing helps support me and my channel, and it allows me to make more videos like the ones you're currently watching. And if you want to help support my channel even further, consider becoming a member. With 3 different tiers to choose from, you'll get access to my videos early, get exclusive behind-the-scenes updates, you'll get creative inputs on new videos, and more. Every member will also be featured in the credits of every single one of my videos. Thank you so much for your support so far. Now, let's get back to the video. Okay, so first off, we have Klefki. Klefki has the Mischievous Lock ability, which is as long as it's in the active spot, every basic Pokemon in play except for Klefki, the Klefki itself, and maybe an opponent's active Klefki, has no abilities. Now, this basically is really useful for Charizard or for Dragapult, basically any stage 2 deck that doesn't want to get immediately pressured by Toadbox or any big basic beat stick deck. Now, there are a ton of basic beat stick decks in the format right now, with Toadbox obviously being the most popular one. And I think that Klefki is really a good answer to that. Mischievous Lock turns off, Latias EX, turns off Pecharunt EX, basically turns off a ton of these, setup cards. And also you can use Klefki, and you can hide behind a Klefki to turn off Psyduck's Damp ability, which prevents Dusknoir from getting blown up. Which means that I think this is the way going forward for Dragapult is if your opponent places down Psyduck, you retreat into Klefki, or you have Klefki in your active spot, you Mischievous Lock, then you can blow up your Dusknoir because it regains the ability, and then you retreat the Klefki or something else, and then you use your Dragapult after that. So I think it's a very interesting card in the format. It's definitely seen some play in Charizard in the what was it? Was it Milwaukee? Yeah, I think it was Milwaukee. No, it couldn't have been Milwaukee. It had to be, what was before Milwaukee? The winning Charizard EX list had Klefki, and obviously that's a very powerful card right now. And the Joust attack isn't that important. I mean, discarding tools could be interesting, but it's mainly just that lock ability that is so criminally underutilized in the format right now. Again, this shuts off Monkey Dory, Mega Kangaskhan, it shuts down Latias, literally a ton of these meta-relevant cards, Teal Mask, Ogerpon. Yeah, so I think, honestly, it just is a very criminally underutilized card in the format, and I've been saying this basically since, I've been saying this for months now, actually. I remember, I want to say 4 months ago or so, I said that Klefki is one of the most underrated cards in the format. Maybe it was 5 months ago. I said Klefki is just super underrated, and I'm glad to see it start to pick up some play. I mean, it's annoying as I've been mainly playing Toadbox lately, and like Terra Box. But it is genuinely really cool to see Klefki start to make a return. I think it's a really fun tech card, and obviously I think it's one of the most impactful cards we'll talk about today. Next up, we have Fluttermane. I've seen Fluttermane start to pop up a little bit as well in the format, and it's basically a really good for Gardevoir with the Midnight Fluttering ability. It says, as long as this Pokemon's in the active spot, your opponent's active has no abilities except for Midnight Fluttering itself. And you have the Hex Hurl attack for 90, and then put 2 damage counters on your opponent's bench Pokemon anyway. Like, Hex Hurl isn't as important. You can obviously use that for Gardevoir. I think Fluttermane, honestly, and Gardevoir doesn't need more tools, like more materials and like more Pokemon and whatever. But I just wanted to talk about Fluttermane because I think Gardevoir is kind of sleeping on Fluttermane, especially in like the mirror matchup. If you're playing against Gardevoir Jellicent or something, if you put up the Fluttermane, the Jellicent EX's ability gets shut off, and then you can use your items and tools like normal, and then you can retreat the Fluttermane after that. And also you can use Fluttermane to like end a turn, kind of disrupt your opponent, basically the same way that Klefki works, but like you kind of just shut off like the active or whatever. So if you like maybe gust up a Latias EX and you need to stall for a turn or so, you can make sure that Fluttermane stays in the active. You lock that Latias with 2 retreat costs now, and it's pretty good. I don't think it's as impactful as Klefki. It's not as splashable as Klefki. Klefki has 70 HP, so it can be searched off Buddy Poffin, and it's just honestly more meta relevant right now. Fluttermane is more of a specialty card, but absolutely I think that the Midnight Fluttering ability is pretty powerful. Okay, next up we have Drifloon. Ever since the Drifblim version of Gardevoir became the popular version, Drifloon usage has gone down, and honestly, I think that's a big mistake on a lot of ends. Drifloon can one-shot Megas, guys. Like, I don't understand why we're not seeing more Drifloon in the format. Maybe people are just scared to try and play really low HP Pokemon that can get knocked out from, like, a simple, like, a tool removal or something like that, or just like it can be knocked out by a Monkey Dory. But then again, you got to realize that this can be a 3-for-1 prize trade, especially with the new Megas. You can get that Balloon Blast up with a Bravery Charm, and it can do huge damage. Like, this is an avenue for Gardevoir to just knock out an active and not care about like having to try and like gust around stuff or try and snipe something on the bench with Screen Tail. Sometimes that's not an option. Drifloon is just a solid option. That's like a one-of card to be able to just deal solid damage out of nowhere. And I really think that it's being criminally underutilized in the format right now. So I just want to throw Drifloon in here because I know it's still been a historically on and off card for Gardevoir. I do think that it's important enough to be included anyways. Next up, we have Enamorus. Now, this was in, I believe, the 2nd place list that lost to Charizard in whatever regionals it was, but Enamorus has the Love Resonance attack, which says if any of your Pokemon in play are the same type as any of your opponent's Pokemon in play, this attack does 120 more damage. Well, if your opponent's playing any Psychic type Pokemon, if they're playing Monkey Dory, if they're playing Latias, or if they're playing any Dark types, like if you're both playing Pheasantipity, which you probably are, then all of a sudden this does 200 base damage for 3 energy, which is incredibly strong, and plus you can boost that with Monkey Dory. So you can actually be dealing like 230, 260 damage with Enamorus with very little drawback. It's not like a fragile attacker like Drifloon. It doesn't get huge knockouts like maybe Drifloon does, but it does get knockouts in places where it counts, like against Pheasantipity or Latias. Like, you literally can just knock out these opposing Pokemon EX, like basic EXs, for little to no effort, as long as you have a good board state with the Enamorus. And it doesn't take a ton of energy away. It doesn't cause you to have to stack all your energy in one space. It just takes 3 energy, and it's a pretty strong attacker because most players nowadays are playing a Psychic type or a Dark type at some point in the game, and Gardevoir really does take advantage of that. So I think Enamorus, and this is a card that I've actually been talking about personally in Gardevoir for a while now. Like, I've thought about it, and I'm like, oh wow, this is a really good card. I don't know why people aren't playing it more. And now I'm starting to see like a tiny bit more usage from it, but I still think that there's room for it to kind of like thrive in the format. Not necessarily like it's a meta-changing card for Gardevoir. I don't think these first 4 cards were kind of like grouped together because they are Gardevoir techs or whatever. But I don't believe that Enamorus is like some groundbreaking like discovery that will change the way that we play Gardevoir. And I don't think any of these cards are. I think Drifloon probably would be the most impactful of the group, just because obviously big damage, but Enamorus is still a solid option nonetheless. Next up we have Solrock, and it's not the Solrock that you're thinking of. It's the Call for Family Solrock instead of the Mega Evolution Solrock. And I only included this one because sometimes you just have a really slow start, and in decks like Lucario, Mega Lucarios, they have like 80 HP, and sometimes you need those fighting gongs in order to like, I think that's what it is, fighting gong. You need those in order to be able to search out energies and not Pokemon, and so Solrock can use Call for Family on a slow turn. I don't necessarily think this would be like relatively popular slash relevant slash practical. I just think that this Solrock is kind of interesting because the Lunatone, the Cycle Draw Lunatone doesn't, or sorry, I think it's Lunar Draw Lunatone, I think. Don't quote me on that. I think it just says if you have a Solrock in play, then it can use the ability. So this Solrock does meet the requirements, and it also has a decent startup attack for those turns where sometimes you just aren't able to piece everything together. You can kind of hop like right on the back of the Solrock and kind of start setting up from there. In addition, we do have the other Lunatone that we have a different Lunatone. I don't remember which Lunatone this is. This is from Obsidian Flames. That's right. This Lunatone is from Obsidian Flames and has the New Moon ability, which says if you have Solrock in play, prevent all effects of any stadium done to your Pokemon in play. So basically you can turn off some like negative effects in stadiums like Jamming Tower, or I think maybe Jamming Tower. I actually don't know how that works. It might not work because it's affecting tool cards. But if it's something like Calamitous Snowy Mountain, even I don't. Sorry, I'm thinking of really bad examples. Yeah, no, Calamitous Snowy Mountain, like Gravity Mountain, Lively Stadium. I don't know why you want to turn off Lively Stadium, but I just think it's an interesting card. I don't think that it's going to be relevant at all. I just thought it was interesting, and I thought I'd include it here. Just both the Solrock and Lunatone from Obsidian Flames are both interesting cards, and I think that they're kind of fun to talk about now that Lunatone and Solrock as Pokemon are now relevant thanks to the fighting type draw engine. Next up, we have Iron Bundle. Now, some of you might be confused why Iron Bundle is here. Iron Bundle has made a lot of appearances in a lot of different places. But then again, let me just reiterate that this is kind of my list on cards that I think we should see more in the format. It's kind of a whole bunch of different things. I guess the term underrated can be interpreted a lot of different ways, and I'm kind of using multiple different interpretations in this video. What I'm trying to say is that Iron Bundle is an incredibly underrated card, in my opinion, still, because it literally changes outcomes of games. Sometimes your opponent tries to stall with a big HP active, especially in the Tord Box matchup. Sometimes your opponent will just leave a big, beefy Mega Absol with like a billion HP in the active spot, and they're like, okay, hit me. Then I'll put use 2 Monkey Dories, and all of a sudden your Pokemon's immediately one-shot or whatever. And that's just like kind of lame sometimes. And obviously there's workarounds around Iron Bundle. Sometimes they just have another big HP beefy basic. But sometimes Iron Bundle can really force the opponent into an uncomfortable position. Especially with something like Wellspring Mask Ogerpon EX. I gotta say that, like, if I had a top 3 of favorite cards in this format, it would probably be Wellspring Mask Ogerpon EX, then Mega Kangaskhan EX, and then Iron Bundle probably right after that for my favorite Pokemon in the format. And Hyper Blower is just so strong. Refrigerated Stream is nothing to laugh at either, but just Hyper Blower is so strong as a free Gust option, and also can kind of, like, threaten the opponent at times, kind of deter them from making certain plays if they know Iron Bundle's there. Or sometimes they can come out of nowhere and just surprise the opponent and they're not prepared for it, and all of a sudden you put yourself in a much more commanding position. So Iron Bundle absolutely, I think, is a card that we should see more in the format, but right now we are not seeing as much as I personally would like. It's still very popular, it's still in a lot of lists, but I think that we could see a lot more Iron Bundle because I love this little guy. He's just so funny, and he's also really good. Next up, we have Gengar with a Night Gate ability. Now, this Gengar is from Paldean, I think Paldean Fates. And this Gengar has the Night Gaze ability, which says you can switch your active Pokemon with one of your benched Pokemon. Excuse me, once per turn. So it's a free switch out every single turn. Obviously, this is a stage 2 Pokemon, and it doesn't, like, Nightmare for 100 damage in a sleep is not exactly that great in the game right now. But the ability to be able to switch out every single turn, especially with a lot of, like, Evoltal, Maractus, and Ethan Sudowoodo lock in the format right now, especially Evoltal. Again, a lot of these are just counters to Toadbox in some way, but just being able to have a free switch out every single turn also allows you to use multiple different abilities, kind of take advantage of a lot of different things. Obviously, Pecharunt EX is a lot more practical in like the Toadbox Mirror matchup, because you can just Pecharunt away something that gets clutch stalled or whatever. But Gengar is also a really good option for any other deck that doesn't have that as an option. Not necessarily a card that I'd say is going to be meta relevant at all. I just think it's underrated because a free switch out is nothing to laugh at in the current format right now, with all the locks and stuff. Next up, we have Caesar. Caesar from Obsidian Flames. And the Punishing Scissors ability, I swear each format we get, there is another reason that you should play Caesar in, like, your Goldango or whatever. I don't know why Goldango is just like, yeah, we're going to completely abandon using Caesar. Sometimes it really matters. Again, we're going to talk about Toadbox. A lot of these situations are going to be talking about Toadbox and how to counter Toadbox, but there are so many of Pokemon EX with abilities right now that basically Caesar can just feast off of them. If your opponent has a full board full of Pokemon with abilities, that's 6 times 30, 6 times 5, that's 310 damage. That's a one-shot on a Mega. And that can be really, really impactful. It also is a good way to get through Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon if your opponent tries to stall with that. Obviously, it's not as relevant as it was before, just because it's a little bit difficult to set up sometimes. But I mean, you have Genesect EX. There's a lot of support going for Caesar right now. I guess the only issue would be it's tough to like recover from if the opponent's Cornerstone like uses Demolish or something and one shots it. But Caesar is definitely in my opinion, an underrated card, just because there's so many abilities in the format right now, to where Punishing Scissors really can make a huge impact in certain scenarios and in certain games. Next we have Great Tusk EX. Not the terrible one that mills like 5 cards off the top of your deck or whatever. This one's also not that great, but I did see someone like win a League Cup or something with this card on Twitter. I don't exactly remember who it was or where or when I saw it, but they just said like they put it in Goldango and like used TM Turbo Energize to be able to power up a Great Tusk if they knew that they were going to be against a Cornerstone matchup. And this is actually kind of interesting because Giant Tusks for 250 damage and it does 50 to itself is not necessarily the greatest thing in the world when you, like, big picture. 50 damage to yourself is actually really bad in the format right now. For such basically a 200 HP giant liability. But it is a Cornerstone Cornerstone Shred option, and I think it's kind of like just underrated in the sense that yes, it can one-shot a Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon, and that it is kind of an interesting addition. I don't think that this card will ever be meta relevant. I just thought it was interesting and wanted to include it because like sometimes Pokemon kind of requires you to come up with these creative solutions. They might not be practical, they might not be like the best answer possible, but it is still an answer, and it does show some deck building creativity, and I really appreciate that in the game right now. I think we're in a good spot in this meta where a lot of different random cards can all of a sudden just become good out of nowhere, and I really like that about this format. Next up we have Blaziken EX. With a Seething Sphere ability specifically, allows you to attach a basic energy card from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. I just think this is a good engine in general. Just be able to like accelerate extra energy into play every single turn is nothing to laugh at. I don't think that it's necessarily too relevant right now. It's just one of my personal favorite EX cards in the format right now. Just that Seething Spirit is really fun, and just makes things a lot more interesting. It opens a lot of doors for deck building, kind of like that Tatsugiri box or whatever, and even some other like decks like Pikachu, just like Quad Pikachu EX, or I don't think it's Quad, it's more like 3. But anyways, like Pikachu box, even like Cynthia's Garchomp, I've seen Blaziken get played in there, and I just think it's an interesting card. Seething Spirit is just nice, and Smolder Assault for 200. There's a lot of grass types in the format right now, like Teal Mask Ogerpons, that is relevant as well. But yeah, not necessarily too great in the format, just a fun card I wanted to include. Next up, we have Blissey EX, or as some viewers of the channel now know, like basically Vernius EX. But I think that Blissey is still an interesting card to like consider in the format right now. It has the Happy Switch ability, which says it's basically an E-switch. Once per return, you can switch an energy from one Pokemon to another. And I think this could be interesting in like Tord Box or something, where you just get a free energy switch every single turn rather than having to use energy switch. So you get you get Happy Switch like onto a Monkey Dory, use Adrenabrain. Or you could have one Monkey Dory, and then you can use Happy Switch, use another Monkey Dory, and then like Penny, and then attach to that Monkey Dory for a third time. Kind of interesting. Also, just like Energy Switch is very, very powerful with a lot more TM Turbo Energized in the format right now as well. So I think that it's kind of interesting. Don't think it's necessarily too relevant. It's a little awkward to try and use, as it does take up, it's a stage 1 engine, and some decks it just doesn't work with that, but it is still a fun card. I do like Happy Switch a lot. Energy Switch is just another card in the format that's not being respected as much as it should. I didn't put it on here as underrated because it is still a popular card, but I think that there should be more Energy Switch in the format just because it's such a powerful effect, and it can really like pivot a game plan and kind of like change a game out of nowhere, and I really appreciate that about Happy Switch. Is it's basically a constant effect, and also on a tanky EX is really cool, and I don't think we're seeing as much Energy Switch as I personally would love to see in this format. Next up, we have Chen-Pao with the Snow Sink ability, which says when you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench, you can discard a stadium and play. This is basically just against like Area 0 decks, for or against Area 0 decks. Not really much to say about Chen-Pao other than that. Sometimes there's a problematic stadium in play, and you can just use Snow Stink, Snow Stink, sorry. Snow Stink, I almost did it again. Try that, saying that 5 times fast. Snow Sink, there we go, got it. It's interesting to use that ability in certain scenarios where like a disruptive stadium gets removed, all of a sudden your Pokemon are free again, or you can use it against something that maybe like survived thanks to a lively stadium, and you just bump it and all of a sudden it gets knocked out. It's an interesting card, again, not very relevant outside of the Terra Shell of like sort of like Raging Bolt, Terra Box, any deck that uses Area 0 Underdepths, but it is still a cool card, and I think that it's not necessarily being utilized as much as it could be. Next up, we have a pretty funny card, honestly. This is probably out of all the cards I'm going to talk about today, this is probably the most hot take card out of all of them, and that's Delibird. This Delibird is just weird. Honestly, I had a viewer recommend this Delibird to me on a live stream, and I kind of thought through it, and I'm like, I guess it's not as terrible as you might think. It has the quick gift attack, which says if you can go first, you can use this attack during your first turn. You can search your deck for any card that you want and put it into your hand, and then shuffle your deck. So sometimes if you get forced to go first and you really need like a good setup card for next turn, or to just start getting the ball rolling, you can use quick gift to kind of help you get going. And there's not as much Iono in the format right now, with a higher focus now on Lily's Determination, so I could actually see quick gift being used maybe like on some, I don't know, some quirky deck or whatever. I don't think it's ever going to be that relevant, but I do think it's an interesting attack, and the meta, like the circumstances in the meta are kind of right for this card. Again, very awkward to search out. It does have 90 HP, and it can be disrupted immediately. And it does take up an awkward bench slot and all that afterwards, but I do think it's actually kind of interesting, and I just wanted to include it as kind of like an honorable mention because it does have an interesting attack that could be useful in certain scenarios. All right, now we're getting into like some of the big hitters. We're switching gears into like more tech cards. Another tech card that this is a serious one here. And also, like, decks that I think are a little bit underrated, or combos that are a little underrated. First up is Hoopa EX. I thought of this the other day when I was playtesting with one of my friends, and I realized that Hoopa EX is actually pretty broken in Tord Box for the mirror matchup. Now, some people have been like, oh, well, if you're targeting the Kangaskhan, then you're not really winning the mirror, as you're not going after Absol. And like, yeah, I see what they mean by that, but also, like, that's 3 prize cards. It's half the prize cards you need to win the game. If your Hoopa goes down, you can just set up your own Absol or whatever. So, I think Hoopa's really underrated. It's a fighting type, and it uses dark energy, so it synergizes really well with that sort of, obviously with the typings all working out. You knock out Mega Kangaskhan, you can knock out any of those, like, bigger, like, colorless Pokemon for big like, especially in Tord Box, they're going to be having a ton of energy in play thanks to Turbo Energize, and so you can just Energy Crush out of nowhere. Like, maybe you go like place it down, attach, Energy Switch, and then boom, you have a Hoopa ready to go out of nowhere, and that's a one-shot on a 3-prizer, incredibly powerful. Bandit's Fist, I don't think people are going to be using that. It's a little expensive just for 200, and for a negative effect rather than a positive effect like Mega Absol or Mega Kangaskhan. But I just think it's an interesting card in general. And I would say this is probably one of the most underrated cards in the format right now, and I think that this might be a secret tech that people are sleeping on that people should consider going forward. Okay, so this is a combo. So this is 2 cards in one little bit here, and that's Archaludon EX and Mega Mawile EX. I just think that this deck in general is really underrated right now. I'm a big fan of Archaludon. I played Poison Archaludon in like an online tournament a few months ago, and I did really well with it. But I think that the deck's kind of evolved. It's taken a new form and kind of like embraced the more Relicanth version of the deck rather than the Poison version. But Archaludon's fun because it's just a tanky 2-prizer. It can do big damage, and it can kind of just run away with games if you're able to position yourself properly. And also, at the end of the game, Mega Mawile, like, you can also use this to accelerate energies onto, like, Mega Mawile, which has the Gobble Down attack, which basically is a win more attack, and I kind of wrote it off heading into Mega Evolution because Gobble Down is like 80 damage for each prize card you have taken, so it's like at the end of the game, it's just, you basically do a ton of damage for each prize card you have taken, but sometimes that's all you need. You just need a big finisher to close out the game, and Gobble Down sometimes gets there, and Huge Bite for 260 is also really good. If your opponent doesn't have any damage on them previously, you can do 260 straight damage, which is more than Archaludon's 220, so that also could be interesting. But I just think that this combo is a bit underrated right now in the format. I don't think it's meta breaking. I just think it's an interesting combo that I've seen pop up and that has had some decent success. Next up, we have Hydrapple EX and Wo-Chien EX. Now, Hydrapple kind of got revived thanks to Meganium from Mega Evolutions, which doubles the amount of grass energy attached to each Pokemon, which charges up not only the Ripening Charge ability, which says that you can attach a basic energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon if you did heal 30 damage from that Pokemon, but it also powers up that Syrup Storm, and it doubles the damage that Syrup Storm does, which says 30 plus, you can do 30 more damage for each grass energy you have attached to all of your Pokemon, which is just really powerful, like when you double it with Meganium. And then you can also slot in a tech option of Wo-Chien EX with the Covetous Ivy attack, which does 60 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon for each prize card your opponent has taken. So this can do massive damage, like a snipe to a Pheasantipity towards the end of the game. And so it doesn't make you have to use like a Gust or anything like that. And Forest Blast for 220 for essentially 2 energy once that Mega Meganium is the Meganium, not Mega Meganium just yet, just regular Meganium. Forest Blaster 220 is also a respectable attack for 2 energies with Meganium on something like maybe a Cornerstone Mask Ogerpon that the Hydrapple couldn't hit. One-shots like Mega Absol. And just kind of those like mid-level basic EX Pokemon. So Wo-Chien, I've been a big Wo-Chien EX fan for a long time. It just hasn't really seen the spotlight. And I think just with the resurgence of grass with Meganium, and with just all the support right now for grass with Teal Mask Ogerpon, and like the Teal Mask Ogerpon Energy Switch combo, Toedscruel, you've got Bug Catching Set. There's just so much going on for grass right now, to where I think that Hydrapple and Wo-Chien can succeed in this current format. Next up, we have Mega Manectric EX, which is kind of like it's kind of the new version of Miraidon, in a sense, where, like, you can use Miraidon, and you can also include a Mega Manectric in your Miraidon deck. You can use Flash Ray for 120 and prevent basically just wall off basics. This really helps against, like, Raging Bolt, against Tordbox if they can't get the 6 damage counters in play. It also really helps against, like, Terrabox and... not Ceruledge, but like against Gardevoir, it forces them around it. Yeah, and like Joltik Box, which is not as relevant, but just kind of those like big basic decks that is a good first attack for it. But also, it has the Riotous Blasting attack for 200 plus. You can discard all energy from the Pokemon and have your attack do 130 more damage. So you're doing 330 for 3 energy, which can one-shot, like, Megas, it can one-shot big, Stage 2 EX Pokemon, so, like, it can be very powerful and come into play a lot, and basically deal damage that Miraidon was incapable of doing before. And it also has Free Retreat, which is pretty cool. It isn't Mega, so it does kind of, like, make the prize trade a little bit awkward for Miraidon, especially if you're playing the Magneton, or whatever, because then that makes it just, they need to knock out the Mega and just Miraidon, but you can make it awkward for your opponent as well, where you can make them go on a 3-2-2 prize map, and that's not always very good for them. So I just think Mega Manectric in, like, Miraidon in general is more underrated. On Limitless right now, I'm, like, still scrolling down. Oh, there it is. It's ranked 31st in the meta on Limitless in play rate. So it's a little bit kind of out there, but I still think it's a cool card and an interesting concept. Don't think it'll be winning anything anytime soon. I could easily be proven wrong, though, as it has what it takes to prove me wrong. But until then, I just think that it's an interesting card and an interesting deck in this format. Next, we have Slowking with the Seek Inspiration attack. There's just so many, like, Stage 1 or Stage 2, single-price Pokemon that just would be too awkward in their own deck, and Slowking can utilize them and take advantage of them, and I think it's a very underrated deck in the format right now. If I look again on Limitless, if I scroll all the way down, it's 26th in play rate, so, like, it does have some notable, footing to stand on this time around. And it does have a 49.87 win percentage right now, which is really impressive, honestly, for kind of what this used to be a rogue deck. But it has the technology to be able to do certain things like one-shot Megas with Annihilate. It has the capability of just kind of like using Trifrost with Kyurem, wipe out those small HP basics. It's just a lot of utility with Slowking. It does rely on the Xatu engine, which is very weak and very linear, meaning that if your opponent takes it out at all, then you're kind of just, like, the game kind of just ends for you. But it is still a fun deck in the format. Honestly, this is one of the most fun options available right now, and I think that Slowking could make some funny things happen in the meta, and as time goes on, it'll just keep gaining more and more different, like, technology that'll be interesting and keep, like, letting the deck evolve. It also does get the Gumshoos for Mega Evolution, which swaps the top card of your deck around, kind of like a Rangaroo from the Sword and Shield era. So I just think Slowking's pretty fun, and I would say that it's a credible deck in this format. Next up, we have Chen-Pao EX. Chen-Pao is actually back on the rise. It was dead in the water for so long this card was, like, so hated on just for how bad it was. And it's actually starting to make a resurgence. Now, it doesn't necessarily have the play rate to back it up. Only 72 people have used it in online tournaments since Mega Evolution started, and it only has a 47% win percentage. But it has been getting second in a lot of these recent tournaments, online tournaments, and it looks like a legitimate deck again, just because its ability to deal big damage. It did get a big boost from the stadium. I think it was like Surfing Beach in Mega Evolution, which allows it to kind of use 2 Shivery Chills a turn with 2 Chen-Paos. It also can like stop sort of like stall plays as well. And there's not as much respect against Chen-Pao, where like before it'd just be like, oh, now I'm gonna Devo your Rare Candy Baxcalibur, and oh, looks like you don't have another Rare Candy to back up your Baxcalibur, or like sometimes you can set out multiple Baxcaliburs now, and also you can play Wellspring Ogerpon, which isn't as respected with Shaman anymore. So Chen-Pao can kind of just run away with games at certain points in time. It has the capability of one-shotting stuff, and it also has some interesting plays with its own options, thanks to like Wellspring and other water type attackers. So Chen-Pao is definitely a deck that is on the rise again. I don't think it's meta changing, just a very nice deck, and I'm happy to see it back because I do love Chen-Pao a lot, and I do think that it deserves a little bit more respect. Alright, next up we have Yveltal. Not the Clutch Yveltal from Mega Evolutions, the one that stalls, but the Corrosive Wind Yveltal. Which says put 2 damage counters on each of your opponent's Pokemon that have any damage counters on it. And this can be diabolical with Frostlass Stall. If you use I actually came up with a quad Yveltal deck, and I think Little Dark Fury did too. It was like Little Dark Fury or For the Win came up with this idea as well. I didn't even know that they made up this idea until like I started looking later on down the line, and apparently we all came to the same conclusion that this is actually a kind of evil deck. Yeah, Yveltal. Wow, evil. But basically, Corrosive Winds can kind of start to double that damage from Frostlass pings. It can damage, and then you can kind of like move off with Monkey Dory, and then you can use a huge like TM Devo if your opponent's just completely overwhelmed. You just wipe out decks like Goldango, Ceruledge even, and it can be just absolutely devastating. After you sit behind Clutch Yveltal for a few turns, then you Corrosive Winds for a turn, and then you Devo after that, and there's no response. It doesn't really help that much against like some of those big basic decks, as a lot of them are now capable of just Monkey Dorying it back, like Tordbox, but in certain matchups, they just can't handle it sometimes, and you can get some big KOs with Corrosive Winds Yveltal. And I think that it does kind of unlock a new sort of like spread archetype that we don't really see right now in the game, which is a little unfortunate, but I think it's kind of interesting to talk about. Next up we have Okidogi with the Adrenopower ability. I wanted to make a video again on Okidogi. I made a video like a year or so ago on Okidogi, but I wanted to make another one because this deck last format before Megas were reintroduced into the game was doing amazing. And I know For the Win has covered this Pokemon again, but I just think that it's still a very slept on card. It basically can boost its HP to like huge numbers, 230 HP thanks to its Adrenopower ability, and with us having Prism Energy now, makes this just absolutely broken. You can also like put a Bravery Charm on it, you can Lively Stadium it, and all of a sudden this Okidogi is super tanky. And you can also use it as a counter to like Mega Kangaskhan. You can one-shot Mega Kangaskhan with Okidogi, and also just it's a single prizer. So like if they spend so much effort to try and knock out one Okidogi, they only get one prize card for it. I think the only thing that's holding this deck back is sometimes the lack of like big damage and the lack of one-shots, and also it doesn't really get a proper draw engine, which is really the only thing holding it back. And sometimes the megas are a little too out of reach by having like 280 plus HP. So it's an interesting card. I just don't see it doing as good as it did last format, but I still think that it's a very underrated card that shouldn't be downplayed at all. And I will still continue to monitor this card and test it out, and hopefully eventually I'll be able to see when the time is right for Okidogi to strike once again. Next up we have Blood Moon Ursaluna, the baby Blood Moon Ursaluna. And I saw Tim Danklin actually has been dominating with Blood Moon Ursaluna, and this is really cool to see. It has the Battle Hardened ability, which says you can put 2 energies from your hand onto this Pokemon, and then you can use the Mad Bite attack, which has 130 more damage for each damage counter on your opponent's active Pokemon. Tim Danklin made a really cool video about how this deck works. You use a Calamitous Snowy Mountain, you put damage on it, you use Monkey Dory, you put the Monkey Dory damage on the active, then you use Mad Bite for a huge amount of damage because they have damage on them already. Very interesting. I would definitely recommend that you check it out. But I've actually been kind of experimenting with Blood Moon Ursaluna myself before Tim Danklin came up with this idea, and I think a few others kind of were as well. I was working kind of with the Dusclops Dusk Noir engine before Psyduck came out, and my brother also thought of the same thing, and so we were kind of thinking of like how this deck would work. But I think that the Tim Danklin version now is the best way to play it, and I honestly could see this one shaking up the meta a lot. So I would definitely consider this deck as a legitimate meta threat, because it does deal big damage, and it does have what it takes to be a legit deck in this format. It is really fun, it's really cool, and it's really ingenuitive. So absolutely thank you, Tim Danklin, for making this deck a possibility, a reality really. And definitely would recommend checking this one out. If I had any deck for you to check out today, it would be this Blood Moon Ursaluna deck, because I really do like it a lot. Alright, next up we have Drillbur. The Dig 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 Drillbur. I think this is from Temporal Forces. And basically it says when you play this Pokemon from your hand onto your bench during your turn, you can search your deck to 3 basic fighting energy cards and discard them. I think this could see use in like Mega Lucario, or maybe even in like Ceruledge as like kind of a mini what is it? A Brilliant Blender. Like instead of using your A-Spec, you just sacrifice a bench slot. And like for Ceruledge especially, you don't really care about losing the extra bench slot, because you're just going to place down like 2 or 3 Charcadets in total, and then you have your Lunatone and Solrock. So you can actually have space on your bench for Drillbur, and it kind of just doesn't do anything afterwards, but like just getting 3 basic fighting energy in the discard afterwards is really good. And also it powers up Mega Lucario's first attack as well, which charges up bench Pokemon with fighting energy from the discard. So it just kind of synergizes well. Again, not a very practical card in a lot of situations, but at least a card to consider if you're trying to discard fighting energy. This is your go-to guy. Next we have Kieran. So now we're moving into trainers. We're all done with the kind of like the niche Pokemon. Now we're going to look at trainer cards. The first one is Kieran. Free switch, a switch option, or 30 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon EX is pretty valuable in the game right now. I just think that Kieran is kind of an underrated card in general. Maybe not as worth it as some of the other supporters in the format, but just an interesting card I think could make a difference in the right deck at the right time. We have Colress's Tenacity. Search your deck for a Stadium and an Energy. This could be really useful in a lot of decks that utilize special energy, like if they use Mist Energy, or they use... and really any deck that plays Prism Energy will play 1 copy or so of Colress's Tenacity. But I do think that like Tordbox could see 1 copy of Colress's Tenacity. I mean, just to get that Mist Energy and like a Lively Stadium out. But it's not as impactful as some of the other supporters. So I think that like it's being used the right amount, but I just like this card a lot, and I think that we could see more of it. Next up, this one's pretty funny, is Regular Switch. Just the average run-of-the-mill Switch card. People are forgetting that this card exists, and then they keep losing to Evoltal Lock, and then they're like, oh, well, how do I beat Evoltal Lock, or how do I beat Wellspring Lock, or any of the other, like, corner, or, like, retreat lock Pokemon in the format. Guys, we have Switch. We don't need to be running Jet Energy all the time. We don't need to be running all of these other, like, higher commitments like Turo or Penny. You can just run an average Switch card, and it does wonders for you. I mean, it's just an awkward inclusion in a lot of situations, but if you're really tired of losing, to retreat lock, then just use regular switch. It exists, and it's right there. It's basically one of the only cards that stayed constant in the game, basically since it came out. So, use switch, guys. Like, seriously. If you're tired of that retreat lock stuff, just remember that this card exists, please. Next we have Scramble Switch. This is the only A-Spec on our list today. I think every other A-Spec that should be good has some deck that's using it. And Scramble Switch is just one that, like, doesn't necessarily get as much love. It's not necessarily amazing. It doesn't always work the way that you want it to. It's kind of awkward, and it's not as great as other A-Specs. I just like to include it here because it does pull off some funny combos sometimes by being a switch card, and B, also being a mass energy switch. You can kind of pair it with, in like Tord Box, if your Mega Absol's getting really low HP, you can swap it with something else, or like Mega Kangaskhan, vice versa. But, I mean, Precious Trolley in that deck is just better. Most decks just don't need to run Scramble Switch at all, but I do think it's an interesting card, and I just want to give a shout out to it because I do think it's a pretty fun card. It's just not the time for Scramble Switch, and honestly, that's okay. It's not necessarily an amazing card, but I just want to give it a shout out. Okay, this is the card that inspired me to make this video, and it's Enhanced Hammer. This card is so broken. I've been playing it in my version of Tord Box, which is slightly modified from the base version, and I just run away with the game. Mist Energy is incredibly popular right now, guys. If you're trying to play Tord Box, sometimes your opponent will just slap on a Mist Energy, and then all of a sudden your terminal period becomes just useless. So what you can do is just use Enhanced Hammer. Get rid of their Mist Energy, get rid of like a Jet Energy, or maybe another special energy, like even Legacy Energy on the active Ceruledge, and you can get the knockout that you rightfully deserve for playing this card. And this is basically the card that inspired me to make this video. Again, it's just so underrated. I don't know why this isn't more of a card in this format for any deck that wants to one-shot, any deck that wants to stall. If you are playing a deck that wants to have an effective attack be effective, just use Enhanced Hammer and you will see a lot more of a benefit because the opponent will crux on that Mist Energy or crux on that Legacy Energy, and they will not expect an Enhanced Hammer out of nowhere. And if you're playing a best of 3, once they know that Enhanced Hammer is there, they will play a lot more finicky. They will play a lot more scared, and they'll play a lot more conservatively. And you can take advantage of that. So just the mere presence of Enhanced Hammer in your decks really can pivot a match more in your favor. Also in similar fashion is Tool Scrapper. If you guys remember, like a year and a half ago, before we had the mass Sword and Shield rotation, I was hyping up Tool Jammer as a very useful card, and it ended up winning me like I think a Win-A-Box or something, like a big tournament, a big local tournament with it, because it just tool cards are everywhere now. Like, tool cards are really back in the format now. We've seen a huge upsurge of tool cards in, like, Tord Box, or in, like, we've seen Air Balloon return to the format, and we've seen a ton of new tools that really impact the game in a lot of ways that are beneficial for the opponent, and sometimes you just don't want them to have those benefits. By using Tool Scrapper, you get rid of tools. There's no reliable way to get tools back unless you're playing a deck that specifically has a tech for that. So by using Tool Scrapper, you can kind of throw off your opponent's game. If they're playing Goldengo, and they're trying to use like double Air Balloon and double Dip, all of a sudden, whoops, there go their Air Balloons. If you're playing against Tord Box, and they have like a Bravery Charm on big beefy Mega Absol, you can just get rid of it. If they have something like Counter Gain, or this is also really good against Gardevoir. If the opponent loads up something like a Screamtail or a Drifloon, Tool Scrapper, you get free prize cards from it. And it's not detrimental to you at all. Or sometimes you don't want a tool card to be on a Pokemon anymore. You can actually Tool Scrapper off of your own Pokemon and slap a new tool on it. It's pretty fun, and it's really interesting. It's a very dynamic card, and I think a very valuable one as well in the format. So don't sleep on this card or on Enhanced Hammer, because I do think that they are honestly the most slept on cards in the format at all, like in general. And these are the two cards, the two major takeaways I want you to take from this video. Next, we have Glass Trumpet. I'm not going to spend a ton of time talking about this card. I've glazed this card for so long. I talked about it in a previous video where I won a tournament with it by using Enraging Bolt EX. Still, my stance stays the same with this card. Incredibly broken Enraging Bolt. And a lot of these colorless type decks that like running the Knockdown Engine and Terras, Glass Trumpet can be a very useful card for certain situations. I mean, honestly, you could even play Glass Trumpet in something like, I want to say Tord Box, but like maybe you're trying to play like a colorless box deck or like a Mega Kangaskhan deck and you have a Terra in play, then Glass Trumpet can also be really useful in that situation as well. But I would say this card is kind of like the Raging Bolt card that I think still makes Raging Bolt good. Not as good as before, but my stance still stays the same for this card. I just really like it a lot. Next we have Repel. I've actually, while playing Tord Box, I have lost to Repel a lot. Because it says switch out your opponent's active to the bench. Okay, it's basically just Iron Bundle. But it's an item card and it's way less predictable. You can't recycle it the same as Iron Bundle, but it's an item. You can search it out without having to like waste a bench slot. Basically, the exact same situation as Iron Bundle, as I said before. Sometimes just switching out the active to the bench is very valuable. So, yeah, Repel is a good card. I don't think it's as good as Iron Bundle because you can't recycle it, and also it's a little bit harder to search out on its own. Just an interesting card. Just wanted to throw it in the mix because it has a very powerful effect, just like Iron Bundle. Protective Goggles is next. With big Mega Evolution Pokemon, all these big basics with 3 prizes entering the fray, I think Protective Goggles is pretty interesting as well. It basically just says basic Pokemon have no weakness, so you can protect your Mega Kangaskhan, you protect your Mega Absol, sort of these Pokemon that might get obliterated from weakness specifically, can get protected by the Protective Goggles. Not much more to say about this card, just turns off weakness, pretty interesting. Next up is Rocky Helmet. Rocky Helmet says if it's in the active and is damaged from an attack, put 2 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. I honestly would have put Vengeful Punch on here as well, because that sometimes is relevant, but I think Rocky Helmet, for any deck that tries to like stall or whatever, against like Control, this also works nicely, because eventually they're kind of just like, they'll take so much damage from Rocky Helmet that'll make a big difference. I don't think this is going to be as popular as like theoretically or like really hypothetically if someone were to play Vengeful Punch in their deck, because one-shotting or KOing is more valuable than just getting chip damage in nowadays. But it's still an interesting card. Just thought I'd include it as well because it is a fun card. I do like these sort of like gimmicky tools, and we're going to talk about a few more gimmicky tools. Next up is EXP Share. This card is also another like energy conservation card, similar to E-Switch. Basically, you put it on a bench Pokemon. I think that actually, part of me wants to put this in Tord Box instead of Counter Gain, because sometimes in Tord Box, you're not going to go behind on prizes, and EXP Share lets you keep an energy in play, and sometimes that's really valuable, like if you want to put it on a Monkey Dory that you want to keep energy on, or if you want to put it on the new, fresh Mega Absol, or Mega Kangaskhan, or Cornerstone Ogerpon. It just keeps an energy in play, rather than having it all sent to the discard. So I think that EXP Share is also kind of slept on because it keeps an energy in play rather than like a situational counter gain where it might not be as impactful because it's only a colorless energy. You have to be behind on prizes, and it just doesn't always work the same way as like EXP Share would. But sometimes it's just not as impactful, and it's a little bit awkward in certain scenarios. So definitely still a card that I like in this format, but it's a bit of an awkward one when you consider that you have to put this as your tool card instead of something else. Next is Handheld Fan. I don't want to see more of this card in the format. I talked about it multiple times on streams and on videos before. Being able to move an energy card from a useful Pokemon in the active slot to a useless bench Pokemon is so valuable right now. But we really don't need to see more of this. I don't think that we should see more Handheld Fan. Do not play this card. I don't know why it's on here. It's definitely not super underrated and could really change the outcome of games. Do not play this card. Do not play this card, please. I don't want to see more handheld fan on ladder. But in all seriousness, this card's good. I would say probably it should see more play. Just not against me, okay? As long as it's not against me, I don't care. That's fine. Next we have Lucky Helmet. Lucky Helmet's actually a really good card. Surprisingly, a really good card. The Pokemon this card is attached to in the active spot is damaged or KO'd from an attack. You get to draw 2 cards. And this is basically, this is hand destruction proof. This is Iono proof. If your opponent Ionos you down to 1 and you have a Lucky Helmet on your active spot, then you get to draw 2 cards for free from the Lucky Helmet. Like, if you know that a Pokemon's going to get knocked out, slap a Lucky Helmet on, just let it get KO'd, and you get 2 more cards. Sometimes those 2 cards make all the difference. Again, another gimmicky tool card that could be useful, but also can be a little bit weird at times, and not as useful as a different tool card, but still an interesting card to consider when deck building in any deck, really. Okay, now we're on to stadiums. We have Risky Ruins as our first stadium, underrated stadium, which says if any player puts a basic non-dark type Pokemon onto their bench during their turn, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. This benefits Monkey Dory decks. This benefits Tord Box, really, because you get free damage put on any Pokemon that isn't dark type. And so that really helps with the terminal period. It helps just put more damage into play. And I think it's just a card that people aren't utilizing as much. But there's better stadiums out there right now. So I don't necessarily think it's like going to make Monkey Dory broken. Evidently it hasn't yet. But I do think that it's a card that's a little bit slept on, because it's basically just Team Magma's secret base for anything that's not dark types. And obviously a really good GLC card as well. Okay, now we have Calamitous Snowy Mountain. I mentioned it a couple times already today, but whenever any player attaches an energy card from their hand onto one of their basic non-water types, which water types is basically relegated to just Wellspring Mask Ogerpon or Chen-Pao EX, put 2 damage counters on that Pokemon. This works well with that Baby Blood Moon Ursaluna, and it also works well with with any deck that really just wants to put more damage onto their own Pokemon or onto the opposing Pokemon. So it racks up quickly and is another just interesting stadium card that I think could see more play in the format. Next up we have Town Store. Again, tool cards are very valuable. We can see a lot more tool cards just by searching them out for free every turn. It is detrimental that the opponent can use it sometimes, but I do think it's a bit underrated right now because you can search out your own tools instead of having to use Arven. So, and it's a consistent, constant effect. So I think at Town Store also could see a bit more play. We also have Pokemon League Headquarters. Basic Pokemon's attacks cost 1 more. So this can basically be a counter, in a sense, to sort of Tord Box. Any of those big basic beat stick decks, requiring them to put 1 more energy on can be really impactful and really annoying for them. And sometimes they just can't do that, and it kind of screws up their entire game plan. So it can make a big difference in certain scenarios in those big basic decks. Definitely another card that I consider. And finally, we have Jamming Tower. This card was so popular for a little while, and again, tools are very valuable. These cards were just this was such a popular card, but now it's basically relegated to just Dragapult, and I don't know why. I think we should see more Jamming Tower in the format. Tools are very valuable. Shutting them off is also very valuable. And not much more to say. I already said my piece about Jamming Tower a lot, and a lot of it was already previously said with like Tool Scrapper. So yeah, those are all of the underrated cards in the format right now that I think. There are plenty more that I probably missed. So definitely tell me what your favorites are in the format right now. And it'll be just interesting to talk about because the game right now is in a very open spot. I think that there's a lot of interesting stuff that can happen. And honestly, I think that we're in a really nice spot where creativity can be rewarded. And so, yeah, thank you all so much for watching. As always, God bless, have fun. We'll see you out there, and we'll see you next time. Thank you all so much for watching.